No, and it's that prayer part is key, right? I mean, when you're going through that things, it's easy to start going into what I call a downward spiral. It's like one thing leads to another in your mind, and the next thing you know, it's like the water in the drain, right? You're going down to the bottom, and you've got to learn to stop yourself along the way
Mhm.
and look at, hey, let me stop, take a breath, keep things in perspective. Like you were just laying out. My children are still healthy and happy. Yeah, we've got this going on. Something's going to break, and being able to, bend a knee and lift it up to God and ask for help, right? And
Yeah.
there is, I'm not going to get into all this, but there's a proper way to pray and a proper, there's not just, hey, give me, right, give me this, but really turning it over and having that relationship, and that's a continual thing. It's not just when you need them, but it's really it's freeing, and you'd be surprised, and don't be afraid too to kind of lift it up and ask for others to pray for you as well.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
for, I know for men, I'm in a men's group at my church, and that's sometimes a little humbling, but maybe that's the lesson you need to learn, right? And that's the thing. You just said it. Look for the lesson in what's going on. What happened that triggered all this? And it may be nothing. It may just be, somebody else uh, caused X, and the reaction was the company had layoffs, and you just got, you were collateral damage, right? But really trying to find out, okay, what was the lesson in all of this, and what can I control as me, as a human, as a person, and then really turning the rest over to God and knowing that, hey, there's part of a bigger plan here, and what's the lesson that I'm supposed to learn, and then taking that lesson, and again, you hit on it, but I want to stress this to people, applying it so it doesn't happen again in the future. And
Right.
that's really hard to do when you're in the middle of a storm. But that's why, again, pray, calm the storm. And there's the proverb of, when Jesus walked out, and I think it was with Peter, went into the water. They were in the boat in a storm like that, and they were all freaking out. He said, but this storm, it's not necessarily just a physical storm. That's also applicable to the storms of life, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I just listened to a sermon on that the other day. I'm trying to think of where it was, but like J- Jesus put them in that storm. Like he was like, "Hey, go out on the boat." Like he knew that storm was coming, and there was something that they needed to learn in that, right? And they needed to learn that
yeah,
they could trust him. And so
yeah.
sometimes, there's a lesson, that we're supposed to walk through. So, but I think, yeah, like kind of summing up, like, what do we do, right? I think we
Mhm.
touched on prayer and trust in the Lord. And I think, stewardship, learning how to be wise, how to manage your finances, and doing that in faith. And then finally, we've touched on this before in the past, but generosity, right? Like you were talking about fear of not having, fear of losing it all. um, Jessica Higdon, she spoke at an event about money, and she was her and her husband were kind of opposites, right? Ray was like, spend all the money. And Jessica was like, I'm so afraid of losing the money. And a lot of it goes to upbringing, right? How they were,
Yeah.
they were raised in that situation. And Jessica was always afraid of losing money. And so she went to a mentor and said, what do I do to overcome my fear of not having? And he said,
Yeah.
start giving away, start giving some
And
away.
start small.
Yeah.
Start small, right?
Mhm.
You don't have to, start with massive sums of money. Just start small, being a little generous. Find a cause that you believe in, right? Um, me, I've got a passion for helping. Number one, human trafficking. I just can't believe that goes on in today's world, right? But it does a lot of it, and then also children, which also ties to that as well. Start donating, to causes that you believe in, right? Start small, maybe $50 a month or $100 or whatever the case may be. But get to a point in what I think you'll realize is, man, I don't even miss it. But going back to looking at how do I avoid these situations and stuff like that. Number one, what can I control? Well, what can we control? Number one, we can control our spending plans, right? The budgeting, and making sure we're putting money away for ourselves, making sure you're encompassing some kind of generous, gift to some, like your cause, your church, or whatever the case may be, and really controlling that aspect of it. But if the stock drops and you get laid off, it had nothing to do with your job performance. Just, hey, there's 1,000 people laid off. You drew one of the lucky numbers, right? You can't control that.
Right.
What can you control? Well, you can have your nest egg, your emergency fund reserve, so it's not as scary, and it gives you time to look for a new job, or maybe even consider starting your own company, or something like that. What else can you control? Well, I can have multiple streams of income, right? Rather than depending on just one, my job, I can have a side hustle or two.